Behind the opulent latticed windows of the Topkapi Palace, where sunlight filtered through gilded grilles, a question lingers. What became of the women who once held sway over the most powerful court of the Islamic world? When their beauty or political usefulness faded, the Ottoman Imperial Harem, known as the Harem-i-Humayun, was far more than a place of luxury and seduction. It was a political institution of immense consequence, where royal consorts, concubines and mothers of sultans maneuvered in silence and shadows. Yet behind the veil of power lay another, darker reality: lifelong imprisonment. Women who once bore heirs or rivaled others for the sultan's favor could find themselves confined to the golden cage, a section of the harem where they were cut off from the outside world. No crime was necessary. Merely being the mother, sister, or consort of a prince who posed a future threat to the reigning sultan could condemn a woman to decades of isolation. The mother of Sultan Mustafa, for instance, spent years in confinement after her son was deposed. Her quarters were sealed, her movements monitored, and her voice silenced. She lived not in exile, but in gilded captivity. These women were not physically tortured in the modern sense, but endured a far more enduring torment: psychological erasure. Days became indistinguishable. Letters were censored. Windows faced walls. Servants reported their every word. They were dressed in finery they would never wear beyond their quarters. Some, such as the once powerful consorts of Murad IV, were said to have lived out their days without ever again seeing the sunlight fall on the Bosphorus. Their names rarely appear in records, but their silence echoes through the stones of the palace still. The eunuch's whip enforcing royal discipline. Who truly held power in the palace of the world's most feared empire? Not always the Sultan himself, but the shadowed figure who held the whip, the chief black eunuch. Known as the Kızlar Asa, the chief black eunuch was not merely a guardian of the Ottoman Imperial Harem. He was its undisputed master of discipline, protocol and secrecy. Imported from East Africa through the brutal networks of the Trans-Saharan and Red Sea slave trades, these men were castrated in youth and raised to serve the court, detached from family, desire and dynasty. They were considered ideal instruments of imperial control. At the height of their authority in the 17th century, the chief black eunuch wielded greater influence than many viziers. He oversaw the education of imperial women, controlled access to the sultan, and enforced obedience with ruthless precision. His word could silence a concubine, or elevate one to the rank of Haseki Sultan. When order in the harem was broken, it was not the sultan who restored it, it was the eunuchs. Whippings were administered with braided leather cords or palm canes. The sound of lashes echoing through marble corridors was a reminder that within this world of perfume and pearls, discipline was absolute. No cries escaped the harem, only whispers. According to chroniclers of the court, the eunuchs used quiet violence, often punishing without raising their voices. They reported infractions directly to the Valide Sultan, who could order further retribution, exile, or worse. Ironically, the eunuchs themselves were prisoners of the system they maintained. Forbidden to leave the palace unless dismissed or dying, they lived in service to a machine that demanded control at all costs. Bastinado, the beating beneath the veil. What punishment leaves no scars upon the face, yet breaks the will entirely? In the hidden quarters of the Ottoman harem, the answer was both feared and familiar. Bastinado, the beating of the feet. Known in Ottoman Turkish as falaka, this punishment was favored for its efficiency and discretion. A woman could be disciplined brutally without marring the appearance demanded of royal beauty. Within the Harem-i-Humayun, where appearances were currency and silence was law, bastinado became a common method of correction, administered behind silk curtains and closed wooden doors. concubines or disobedient kalfas, mid-ranking female officials could find themselves subjected to falaka for transgressions as minor as gossiping, disobedience, or violating the strict codes of movement and speech. The method was cruel in its simplicity. The woman's ankles would be bound and her feet elevated. A eunuch or palace official would then strike the soles repeatedly with a wooden rod. The number of blows was determined by the severity of the offence and the whims of those in power. Ottoman court records and chroniclers noted that falaka could render its victims unable to walk for days, sometimes weeks. Yet it left little trace, just swelling, bruising, and silence. It was often carried out in the laundry rooms, courtyards, or servant quarters, places far removed from the Sultan's view, but never beyond his authority. Bastinado was more than punishment. It was a message, a warning etched not into skin, but into memory. Every footstep taken afterward, hesitant, trembling, was a reminder that obedience was not optional. Silken execution, the velvet noose of death. What does mercy look like in an empire ruled by absolute power? In the Ottoman court, it came wrapped in silk and left no blood behind. Execution by silk cord, known as bowstring strangulation, was the empire's preferred method for eliminating royalty, concubines and high-ranking officials without the dishonor of spilled blood. But within the palace walls, it was also used to silence the harem's most dangerous women, those whose ambition or influence threatened the delicate hierarchy of power. When a concubine or consort was condemned, often after secret investigations or whispered allegations, she would not be paraded or publicly shamed. A eunuch, acting on the Sultan's silent decree or the Valid Sultan's command, would carry out the execution swiftly in the stillness of night. The body was removed in silence. Records were minimal, sometimes omitted entirely. The woman's name might vanish from palace registers, her chamber reassigned, her jewelry redistributed. This method was considered honorable, a contradiction only the court could justify. Bloodless, dignified, and efficient, it spared the empire the stain of public scandal. But for the women within the harem, it was a constant, terrifying reminder. No one was too high to fall. One of the most chilling cases involved the downfall of Roxolana's rivals in the 16th century. Though never officially recorded as strangled, several former favorites disappeared as her influence rose. The implication was clear: power shifted not by debate, but by quiet death. The Ottoman harem was not merely a place of luxury, it was a crucible of power, fear, and silence, where ambition was bound by silk and disobedience met with shadows. Behind the veils and gilded walls, royal women lived and died by rules few dared to speak aloud. These secret torments were not footnotes of history. They were instruments that shaped the destiny of empires. Centuries later, the echoes remain, of feet beaten in silence, of rivalries ended without a cry, of lives unmade by whispers. The harem was a world where beauty was a weapon, and survival an art of silence.